Welcome back, dear children, to another session of our English class. Are you all ready to learn English? Okay, so let's start today's class. Students, shall we rewind the previous class? Okay, now I'll ask you some questions based on the first part of the story. So, what's the title of the story? Yes, very good. The grain as big as a hen's egg. Who's the author of the story? Very good. Leo Tolstoy is the author of this story. What's the title of the first part of the story? Yes, the discussion is the title of the first part of the story. Could the wise man find out anything about the corn? No, the wise man couldn't find out anything about the corn. Why did the peasant suggest that his father might give a better solution? Yes, very good. His father, who is older and more experienced, might know where such grains grew. Now, shall we move on to the second part of the story? Okay, let's go. All of you take your English text and take page number 109. What's the title of the second part of the story? Yes, the great grandfather is the title of the second part of the story. Students, now all of you pause this video and read the second part of the story, The Great Grandfather. Hope you all read the second part of the story. Am I right? Now I'll give you a model reading of this page. All of you listen carefully and find out the difficult words. Okay? The king sent for the old man's father, and he was brought before him. He came walking on one crutch. The king showed him the grain, and the old peasant, who was still able to see, took a good look at it. And the king asked him, "Can you tell us, old man, where a corn like this used to grow? Have you ever bought anything like it or sown it in your fields?" Though the old man was rather hard of hearing, he could hear better than his son. "No," he said, "I never sowed nor reaped any grain like this in my field. As for buying, I never bought any, for in my time money was not yet in use. Everyone grew his own corn, and when there was any need, we shared with one another. I do not know where such kind of corn grew. Ours was larger and yielded more flour than present-day grain, but I never saw any like this." Students, now shall we move on to the new words and their meanings? Okay, let's go. Yield means to produce crop. Flour means a powder obtained by grinding grain. Students, now I'll give you the explanation of this page. The old man's father was brought before the king. He walked with the help of the crutch. The king showed the grain to that old peasant. He could see that grain clearly. Then the king asked the old peasant about the grain in his hand. The old peasant could hear better than his son. Now, what was the reply of the old peasant? Yes, the old peasant said that he never sowed nor reaped any grain like this in his field. And he said that he do not know where such kind of corn grew, and he never saw any like this before. Students, now all of you take page number 110. I'll give you a model reading of this page, and you have to find out the difficult words. Okay? I have, however, heard my father say that in his time the grain grew larger and yielded more flour. You had better ask him. So the king sent for the old man's father. They found him and brought him before the king. He entered walking easily and without crutches. His eyes were clear, his hearing good, and he spoke distinctly. The king showed him the grain, and the old grandfather looked at it and turned it about in his hand. "It is long since I saw such a fine grain," said he, and he bit a piece off and tasted it. "It's the very same kind," he added. Students, hope you all identified the difficult words. Am I right? Now, shall we discuss those words and their meanings? Okay, let's go. Distinctly means easily or clearly. Now, I'll give you the explanation. All of you listen attentively. After this, the old peasant set the king to ask his father, who said that in his time the grain grew larger and yielded more flour. So the old peasant's father was brought before the king. He was entirely different from his son, the old peasant, because he could walk easily without crutches. His eyes were clear, hearing good, and he spoke clearly. So the king showed him the grain, and the old grandfather said that he is seeing this kind of grain after a long time. He took a piece and tasted it. And he added that it is same as the grain that he had seen long years ago. So hope you all understood the second part of the story, the great grandfather. Students, now all of you take page number 111. Look here, what's the title of the third part of the story? Yes, the cone is the title of the third part of the story. Students, now all of you pause this video and read this third part of the story, the cone. Hope you all read it. Am I right? Now, I'll give you a model reading of the first page and all of you listen carefully and find out the difficult words. Okay? "Tell me, grandfather," began the king, "when and where was such corn grown? Have you ever bought any like it or sown it in your fields?" And the old man replied, "Corn like this used to grow everywhere in my time. I lived on corn like this in the days of my youth and fed others on it. It was such a grain that we used to sow, reap, and thresh." And the king asked, "Tell me, grandfather, did you buy it anywhere or did you grow it all yourself?" The old man smiled. "In my time," he answered, "no one ever thought of such a sin as buying or selling bread, and we knew nothing of money. Each man had enough corn of his own." Students, hope you all identified the difficult words. Am I right? Now, let's discuss those words and their meanings. Thresh means to separate grains. Sin means wrongness. Now I'll give you the explanation of this page. All of you listen carefully, okay? Here, the king asked the grandfather about that corn. So what details of the grain did the great grandfather give? Yes, very good. The great grandfather said that in his time the grain was big as hen's egg and it grew everywhere. People cultivated these grains and lived on this corn. The king inquired the grandfather whether he bought it anywhere or he grew it all himself. Hearing this inquiry from the king, the old man smiled and said that in his time no one bought or sold this corn because they didn't know anything of money because each man had enough corn of his own. Students, what's the sin mentioned by the grandfather? Yes, very good. Buying or selling grains for making profit was considered as sin in grandfather's time. Students, now all of you take page number 112. I'll give you a model reading of this page. As usual, you have to find out the difficult words. Okay? "Then tell me, grandfather," asked the king, "where was your field? Where did you grow corn like this?" And the grandfather answered, my field was God's earth. Wherever I plowed, it was my field. Land was free. It was a thing no man called his own. Labor was the only thing men called their own. Answer me two more questions, said the king. The first is, why did the earth bear such grain then and has ceased to do so now? And the second is, why does your grandson walk with two crutches, your son with one, and you yourself with none? Your eyes are bright, your teeth sound, and your speech clear and pleasant to the ear. How have these things come about? And the old man answered, these things are so because men have ceased to live by their own labor and have taken to depending on the labor of others. In olden times, men lived according to God's law. They had what was their own and coveted not what others had produced. Now let's go through some new words and their meanings. Plow means to dig. Labor, work. Cease, to stop happening. Covet, to desire something very much. Now I'll give you the explanation. Here the king asked the grandfather where his field and where did he grow corn like this. As he replied, the grandfather told about the life of the people in olden days. In olden days, people worked hard for good harvest. Money was not in use. They were not bothered about earning and saving money. Their field was God's earth. Wherever they worked, it was a thing no man called his own. Labor was the only thing men called their own. In that time, men lived according to the God's law. They were healthy also. They had what was their own and coveted not what others had produced. Why was the great grandfather healthier than his son and grandson? Yes, the great grandfather was hardworking and lived by his own labor. In his period, vegetables and fruits were cultivated by natural and organic method. They never used pesticides or fertilizers to get good harvest. The vegetables and fruits harvested from the grandfather's farm were fresh and delicious. So compared to the great-grandfather, his son and grandson were less hardworking. Students, what moral do you learn from the old man's words? Yes, very good. Work is worship. Earn our daily bread by hard work. This is the moral that we learn from the old man's words. Students, hope you all understood the explanation of the third part of the story, the cone. All of you read this story thoroughly, and in the next class we will discuss the activities based on this story. See you in the next class. Thank you, dear children.